It is important to use the right components to display data, but it is equally important to let users submit their info. Most of the time, as a front-end developer, you will be dealing with forms in one way or another, so today we'll be talking about it. The most common component is the text field. It is built with a bunch of other components which can all be edited through its props. Let's talk about its basic props first. Adding the component by default will look like this. You can add a label for the input with the label prop. It accepts a React node, so you can create complex labels as well. If you want the label to stay on top, you can control this with the input label props using the shrink property. There are three variants: outlined, filled, and standard. You can modify each of its behaviors through the input props, since it will adapt depending on the variant. You can also add a helper text and modify its props in the form helper text props likewise. The text field have a color prop, however, it will only take effect if the input is focused. You can use the focus prop to manually do it as well. You can change it to a controlled text field with the onChange and value prop, managing errors with the error prop. When true, it will apply the error class to all of its components. You can change the text field size to small or any other variants you have added. HTML input props are also available in the text field, such as disabled, multiline, required, placeholder, type, you get the drill. Didn't I tell you that the text field was composed by many other components? Well, you can break it down if you want to customize your own inputs as well. Besides that, just stick to the text field component. You might have noticed the form control component. This is not only used by the text field, it can also be used to encapsulate other inputs as well, such as checkboxes, radios, and switches. These components do not provide any label, so it is normally used with the form control label. You can change the position of your label as well with the label placement prop. You want to also add a title to your choices, so you can add the form label component. And to identify for what input is, that's when the form control comes in clutch. Now you have a nice looking input there. Let's go a little more in depth about the checkbox component. Visually, it can have three states: checked, not checked, and indeterminate. This can be controlled with the check and indeterminate prop handled by the onChange prop. The latter is usually used when you have a select all checkbox. However, you can implement your own logic for it. For example, here I have a function, handleChange, that when checked, it will add or remove the value to the array. Then, it checks if that value is on the array for it to be checked. And for the indeterminate, it shows if at least one is selected, but not all, that will be our check state. And for the function handleIndeterminate, it adds all item values to the array if not all items are selected. Otherwise, just uncheck everything. You can also change the size and the color as well as the unchecked and checked icons. You can also disable the input if needed. If there are multiple related checkboxes, you can wrap them in a form group component, which makes them more compact. This also applies to switches. For radios, they have their own components called radio group that we will be talking about it later. Switches are similar to checkboxes, although they visually look different as you can see. However, they both have the size, color, disabled, check, onChange, icon, and check icon props. If your CSS skills are top-notch, you can also customize your own switches like they did in here. Now, let's talk about the radio. You also have the size and color prop. However, they are handled with the radio group component with the value and onChange prop. That is because only one radio should be selected. You can also set the radios horizontally with the row prop. Remember that you can use the form control and form label to add a title and a form helper text to add a caption. Do you remember that I told you that a text field is composed by multiple components? Well, those parts are also used in tandem with the select component. There's a caveat though. You need to provide the same value for the select value and the input label to add the animation. However, it is not a requirement to provide a label, and instead, you can add a disable option and set the initial value to that option. The select component uses menu items as their options, and they work just like the option HTML tag. You can customize its container menu with the menu props. And speaking of customization, you can modify the select value with the render value prop. It returns a React node. Not only you can do your custom logics and styles, it is also useful for multiple selections. You can enable it with a multiple prop. However, this will render an error. That's because the value needs to be an array, so it can manage multiple values. Meaning, we also need to change our onChange method. In TypeScript, you will need to pass this type, else it will mark it as an error on your value prop. And it's done. You can style your select or menu to set it a static width. Now, you can actually choose to not use this component and use it directly on a text field. That's because the text field also have a prop called select and can access its props using the select props. It is exactly the same as using the select component, just less code. Pretty neat, right? There is also a combination of text field and select component called Autocomplete. You can type in the input to search the option you are looking for. It requires two props. The render input, which normally is the text field, renders the searchable area, and the options, which are the options you can search for. It can be an array of strings or an object, as long as it includes the label property, and that's pretty much it. There's a ton of customizations though, but before that, let's talk about a controlled autocomplete. You will need to provide an onChange method. Let's use the object options, since that's the most common way of controlling values. You'll get the entire object as the new value and null if it is erased. Now, let's save the entire object. What about the value? Just set it up with a value prop. However, since it is an object and they cannot be directly compared because of JavaScript, you need to provide the prop is option equal to value and compare it this way. There you have it, a controlled component. Of course, it is easier with an array of strings because it just compares it directly. Let's talk about customizations. You can change the option styles or label with the render option prop. Just be sure to forward the props. Consequently, you can also change the input label with the get option label prop. There's a loading and loading text prop, which shows when options are empty. A multiple prop, which is exactly like the select component. You can group your options by categories with the group by prop and customize it with render group. There's also a free solo prop, which is similar to a search bar. I'll say those are the basic stuff on autocomplete. If you need a specific use case, you can check their playground. A form wouldn't be completed without a button to submit the form, right? There are three variants: text, contained, and outlined. Remember that you can add your own variants as well. You can change the color according to your theme's palette, the size, and even add icons at the start and end of the text. It accepts native properties as well, such as disabled and type. All of these props also applies to the icon button components, except for the variants. They do not have variants. You can also create your own button from scratch using the button-based components, but I wouldn't bother. We're using Material UI to save time after all. There is an experimental component called loading button by installing the package MuiLab. However, you can achieve the same result pretty much with some logic. If you need to group your components, you can use the button group component. You can use the same props mentioned before in the button group to apply it to all buttons. There's also this component called floating action button. You can see this component a lot on mobile apps. It has two variants: circular, which is the default, and extended, mostly used on text. The only difference is the amount of border radius each one has. There's also another type of button called toggle button, which is similar to a checkbox. You can see these kind of buttons used on a markdown box or any Microsoft Office app basically. Just like the checkbox, it has a grouping component called toggle button group, in which accepts an array of values that, if present, that button will be selected. You can also force it to select just one with the exclusive prop. You can also change its orientation, size, and color. These are most of the basic inputs you'll see on every application. Feel free to comment if you wish to see other components as well. That's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!